Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Darren Bondy from Onward Media Group, and I'm excited to be joined today by Dean Benard from Benard and Associates. Thanks for coming on today, Dean.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I want to start off a little bit, if you want to tell us a little bit about your company and kind of how it started and where it came from.
Sure. So Benard and Associates has been around now for almost 20 years. We're celebrating our 20th anniversary on October 4th of this year. And it was, one of those things. For a year, I worked in different professions over the years. I was a nurse, then I became a police officer, then I worked at a regulatory body and managing an investigations team. And through all of those times, always felt like I had that entrepreneurial bug, that spirit that needed to be satisfied. So I was always wondering, what would that be? What could that be? And one day it kind of hit me as I was working in the regulatory field. I thought, there's a need for regulatory investigators. There's a need for a company that can do these investigations in a way that will be efficient and accurate and get the job done, because these organizations were struggling at the time. And so that was the idea. And then it was a question of, well, how do I do this, right? Because I'm at that time I was making a decent wage, I was comfortable, and I was looking to basically walk away from all of that and take the risk. And it all started with trying to figure out what would that look like in terms of being financially able to do it. So bit of a story that I always like to tell, because I owe this woman a great deal, but a woman that I worked with at the time, we were out having lunch one day, and I told her my idea. I said, I really want to do this. She was so supportive. She said, this is exactly what you need to be doing. I said, yeah, I'm going to need some money to get this started. And it's a risk. The risk I'm okay with, but the money, I don't have it. And she reached into her purse and she pulled her checkbook out and she said, how much do you need? And so I told her. She cut me a check. Pay me back when you can. Go off and do it. So I took her check. 4 months later, started the company. Wow. And it's been going strong ever since.
That's incredible. Like, now, in a situation like that, did you find that this was it a calling for you in this specific area, or was it more so that you'd been in this space, you had that entrepreneurial bug, and you thought, I know I can figure out a solution for this? Because, like, you said you went from nurse to police officer to in regular. Like, so when you came out of college, was nursing something that was a career path that you wanted to pursue, or was it one of those things like, I'm not entirely sure what my path holds for me yet, and I'm kind of just feeling things out a little bit?
Yeah, I think it was more, I'm not sure where this is going. It's interesting because if you look back on it, you'd say, what a master plan. The nursing, the policing, the regulatory work, it all came together to create this perfect mix of skills to be able to offer these services and to be able to build this company. But that plan wasn't there. Right. It was just, each move was like, what feels right now? And so yeah, a little bit was sort of feeling it out, trying to understand where I should go, what I should do. But that, I always knew I would own a business. I always knew that I would build something from nothing. That was the goal. And it felt right because, at the risk of sounding a little boastful, I was really good at it. And I didn't imagine it would be as big as it is now. I thought it would probably just be me and maybe one other person doing our thing. But over the course of time, it really grew, and we were able to innovate and grow and spread into other areas. So yeah, it's always been sort of a, what's the next step type of approach.
And all that experience, I think, probably equipped you to be able to not only take that step, not only the confidence to take that step, but to be like, okay, I've had these experiences. I know what I'm capable of in different fields. So now I have that confidence to kind of take that next step with this company. And once you get that backing, that little boost to say, okay, go do it. Someone believes in you. That's actually pretty powerful, I would say.
It was. The confidence was there, but the means of getting it done wasn't. And once that opportunity presented itself, it was a no-brainer to take that chance and make a move, and it all paid off in the end.
Yeah. And now you're a company the size, like, what's the size of the company now?
So we have 17 employees, which doesn't sound huge, but in the area that we work in, it's pretty big. I mean, a lot of our clients have fewer employees than we have. So 17 employees. We've diversified into 2 different areas of investigations. So we do regulatory investigations, which is really where it all started. But then a couple of years in, workplace investigations became something that I saw an avenue for. And I thought, I don't want to have all my eggs in one basket. I'd like to diversify and have different service offerings. And of course, all the while offering investigations, we also offered mediations. So there's very few organizations that do both. And
Right.
so it was an opportunity to just continually innovate. And then, of course, as you're doing this work and making a name for yourself, well, then all of a sudden it's like, well, maybe I can teach some people how to do this. So in bringing on employees and teaching them how to do it, it became apparent that maybe we should be offering educational resources.
Mm-hmm.
So then that created our educational branch. And from there, our coaching branch. And so each piece just kind of built on the next.
And so you've adapted over time to meet these needs. So if you were looking back at the beginning of it, your main focus was these investigations. So how did that happen over time? Like, was it just we saw the need, we filled the need? Is that essentially what it was?
Kind of. I mean, when I worked in a regulatory space, I was a manager of investigations. And so my thinking was, well, I'm going to talk to my counterparts. So I'm going to talk to all the managers of investigation at all the other regulatory bodies. I'm going to ask them, if there was a company that could provide these services for you, would that be something you'd take advantage of? And the answer was overwhelmingly yes. And in many cases, it was like, and if it's you, for sure. So I was like, okay, so this sounds feasible. So let's give it a try, because I knew that there were areas of investigation some of the organizations weren't as comfortable with. So I thought at the very least, I can take on the stuff that they're less comfortable with and, help them that way. Mm-hmm. And then it just kind of took off.
And it sounds like that, like the relationship building piece of that as well. Cause like you're saying, if it's you that's doing it, that's a piece of it. And again, like if you tried to start this company fresh out of college, your impact would have been significantly different. Working in that regulatory field, building those relationships with people in the area where you're going to be working is going to be helpful to be able to establish that brand as you branch out into your own.
100%. I mean, in fact, everything's about relationships, in my opinion. When it comes to business, it's all about the relationships. And even now, our clients, I look at our clients as their relationships, they are partnerships. And if there's no trust, if there's no confidence, then it's pretty hard to establish that business relationship. And so, yeah, the work that I had done over the years was understood, was well known. In fact, I had received an award for investigations excellence. So everybody in that regulatory world knew, oh, he's pretty good at what he does. So having those relationships and that confidence gave people the ability to say, yeah, we're going to give him a try. And then from there, it was on me to deliver. And if I delivered, then hey, we're good. And for the most part, yeah, we've delivered. And the team has now it's amazing because I do very little actual investigative work, but I have a team of people who are just phenomenal. And this company would be nothing without them. The way they step up and do things for our clients sometimes, and it's not their fault, but they sometimes ask us to do things that are last minute, that are, urgent. And, our staff are always willing to step up and do that. So that's all part of the relationship. They know, they pick up the phone and call us. They know we're there for them. Mm-hmm. So, and thankfully for us, they've continued to be there for us.
And as you build that team out, like what is your thought process behind building that team culture and kind of like your leadership style as you train and educate and build this team that you can trust to do most of that day-to-day work? What is the thought process in that, in going and doing that?
It's interesting because, investigations and some people would like to think that, people who do investigations have this some special quality. They don't really. It's not rocket science. I mean, investigations takes a certain skill set, certain abilities to do certain things, which there are lots of crossover skills. So if you look at our team and how it's made up, there are people, I've got one investigator who's phenomenal who I hired practically right out of college. I've got others who were former police officers, others who were former human resources professionals, others who are nurses. So, it's for me, the key to our success around staffing has been finding people who have the right personality, the right mix of skills, and not focusing so much on, well, have you been an investigator? I can teach you that, but if you've got the right skill sets, that's what's going to be important. And so through that, we've been able to build a really solid team. And then culture is a whole other issue. We've tried to create a culture on this team where it's all based on loyalty. We don't have, a lot of investigative firms, and I'm not trying to cast any dispersions, but a lot of investigative firms, they hire people on sort of contingency. It's like, well, I'll call you when I need you and I'll pay you a percentage of what I earn and blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
Whereas I'm like, no, you're going to have a full-time job with benefits. We're going to look after you. We're going to make sure you can depend on your salary so you're not wondering where the work's coming from. And by giving people that loyalty, we get it back in
Absolutely.
fully, right? And we're also kind of a cool environment. We have a lot of fun.
Yeah, and it's a big enough team, but it's also a small enough team in that you're going to be close with all 17, associates, and I think that's probably the beauty of it is that you can instill that culture in that core group and feel confident about their abilities to do their job because you're there too, right? Like I'm assuming, is it partly remote and in office, like a little bit of both?
Yeah, the pandemic changed things for us quite dramatically. In fact, it was interesting because when pre-pandemic, I had been trying to make the argument to many prospective clients all over Canada, hey, we can do this work for you. We don't need to physically be there to do this work. We can do this for you. And it was really a difficult argument to make. People weren't buying it. Then all of a sudden we had the pandemic. Everybody was forced down that path. And now I didn't have to make the argument anymore. And now so interestingly enough, since the pandemic, actually shortly after the pandemic started, we started gaining clients in every province. We now have clients in every province in Canada.
Wow.
So that was, but balancing that whole hybrid piece, like we have some staff come in the office every day, some come in when they want, some work almost permanently from home. It's all good because they're all responsible adults and we treat them like adults, which is another part of our culture. We treat people with respect, and yeah, it is important. I think people need to feel that their employer has faith in them to do what they need to do. And they demonstrate it every day, so there's no reason to think otherwise.
Yeah, regardless of where they're physically
Exactly.
situated.
Yeah.
That's and like, is there an interesting stigma around it? So you think investigations, you think like you're going and sneaking around and trying to figure this out. But I'm assuming a lot of it is going to be some of that, the minutia of emails and going through files and reviewing documents. Is that accurate to say that?
It is. It's we have a very interesting mix of work, and a lot of people will say, "Oh, investigations. That must they have this sort of glamorous sort of movie and TV image of what investigators are." And while we do some of that, I mean, we almost all the time we're doing things like search warrants, and we do a little bit of surveillance. We do undercover. So there are those moments where we're doing that, but the majority of the work can be very tedious. We've got. In fact, one case we just recently started, there were 30,000 emails that have to be looked through. So you can imagine the tediousness of having to go through all those documents and look through all those emails to find a couple of things. It's not the glorified, type of thing that we see, PIs that we see on TV. It's definitely got its mundane, tedious, day-to-day piece to it as well.
Yeah, but you're doing some of those stakeouts with the coffee and the donuts outside the
we are, exactly. In fact, yesterday we had two different investigations happening where that's exactly what was going on. Getting there to the place that you're going to look at, where you're going to be observing, having to get there at 5 a.m. because you don't know what time that person might show up, sitting there for 10 hours, not being able to leave. So as you can imagine, there's things you have to try to manage while you're stuck doing that. It could be, the job can be demanding in that respect. But that's also the variety. And Absolutely. I think that's what a lot of our staff love. They love the variety in the work that we do. The fact that, one day I'm going to be sitting at my desk, comfortable with my coffee, typing a report. Another day I'm going to be out in the field in my car following somebody, or I'm going to be posing as a potential client or patient of a person who's practicing a profession without a license and trying to catch that person's, find out what that person's doing. So that variety certainly helps.
It definitely would spice it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Have you considered, when it comes to the tedious nature of it, have you investigated AI as a potential, assistant, essentially, like just a superpower, not necessarily to replace the work, but to support kind of the tedious nature? You have 30,000 emails to go through. Like, are there ways to improve that efficiency-wise with AI?
Well, we're definitely exploring it. And, there's a lot of things about AI that, the potential is endless. And we're certainly hoping to be able to leverage AI in many different ways. But we also have to be cautious because, as you can imagine, everything we do is highly sensitive, highly confidential. So we've got to be really careful. Like, I could take an interview that I've done and take all the notes I've typed and throw them into ChatGPT and say, spit out a summary. and it'll do a beautiful job, I'm sure. In fact, I've tested it with like fictitious information. But can I take information that is actually confidential information and put it out there in cyberspace and be comfortable that that's not going to fall into the wrong hands or be misused in some way? So until we have those kinds of assurances, I think we've got to really tread carefully with that. Right now, we're dabbling with the transcription services and trying to find a transcription service that does a good job, for interviews, and we're looking at that. So yeah, AI is definitely on the horizon. There's a million things that it could do.
Ever changing too.
Oh yeah,
and it almost sounds like there's a space for a company to come in with AI services like ChatGPT, but with that security, that cybersecurity, and that element of your data protection to be able to leverage it for sensitive topics. Because I could think of numerous companies that handle sensitive information, but then would also benefit from AI. So it's interesting to hear that, because again, like throwing into ChatGPT, like who knows what the safety level of that is in terms of your data privacy and everything. And so it's like, I can see the value of this in terms of the summaries and the data I could get from it, but also what are they collecting on the other side of that?
Exactly. And it's kind of ironic, because I've even thought about, I don't even know if I should say this for people to hear it, but I live in perpetual fear of a cyber attack. I take
Honestly.
every single precaution that we can take to prevent, being hacked or, anything like that. And I've often thought, could AI be almost like a security guard for, like, there's got to be applications where AI could be used to protect our data.
Yeah.
Right. So I just see this, like you say, this as ever changing, this multitude of possibilities. I mean, like the 30,000 emails, you're looking for 10 keywords, it could give them to you in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Things like that.
And
Save clients
if you
money.
were confident that the data wouldn't be exposed or vulnerable, you could do that comfortably, knowing, okay, I'm going to get the data I need out of here, but I also know it's protected.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely an avenue for, again, I think we've talked about AI all the time, and it's almost just hard to keep up with the capabilities, and then to leverage it to a place where it's beneficial and not dangerous too.
Exactly.
I want to move a little bit on to kind of like your impact in the community and your legacy as a whole. Like, what would you say kind of is an overarching goal for the company in terms of how you impact your local community? I know you're very involved charitably as well.
Yeah, we just started a new initiative, actually. My wife and I, Brenda, we started an initiative. We call it the Force for Good initiative. So we started a little website. It's in its infancy at this stage, but we're trying to be much more philanthropic and use we recently became a B Corp. And for those who aren't familiar with it, it's like a certification process you go through, and it has a lot more to do with how you run your company. It's not how profitable you are, but are you using, well, one of their taglines is using business as a force for good. So the idea is that we're using our business to make a difference in people's lives. The nice thing is the work we do, the very nature of the work we do really helps people. So we always have that in the background, but now it's taking it to another level. We actually started giving our staff paid time off to do charitable work. We've engaged in a number of different charitable events. I was recently in a charity boxing match for the Pinball Clemens Foundation to raise money for marginalized youth. So there's a lot of things that we're trying to do, and we're going to latch the Force for Good initiative to Benard and Associates and continue to try and give back and build something that really makes a difference.
And I think that too, in terms of even a work culture, like coming to work for someone like that in a position where I know that not only is the work I'm doing beneficial to the people we're helping, but that also my employer cares enough about charity and charitable donations and those impacts that they're going to empower me to go out and do those things. In fact, I can take a paid day off and go contribute to the community in some way or another. It's a valuable add to the culture of the company as well.
For sure. And that's what our goal is. Like, it's funny because, just the other day, I was talking to one of my staff about bringing on another investigator because we are growing very rapidly. And she said to me, the culture here is incredible. She said, this is, because I was saying to her, well, this person currently is earning an astronomical amount of money that we just simply can't afford to compete from a financial perspective with what they're currently earning. And she said, yeah, but there's a lot more to it than money. And the culture that you create, the freedom we have, the flexibility we have, the trust you put in us, the respect we're given, those things count. And I thought, okay, well then I guess maybe it's being felt. Maybe that
Absolutely.
Effort that we're making, we're not perfect. We've made mistakes. There's no doubt. But I feel like we have really created this nice, comfortable, safe place for people to work.
And I think if the intention's there and if the reasons behind it are good at its core, people feel that and they'll see that. I think that's
Absolutely.
the benefit of it. Coming up on 20 years, what kind of lessons have you learned over the last 20 years that have kind of brought you to today that you could share?
Wow. We could be sitting here for several hours as I talk about all the mistakes I've made. I mean, the one thing is I've learned way more from the mistakes than I have from the successes. There's no doubt about that. I think for me, it's been the real lesson I've learned is that if you're passionate about something and if you put that effort into it, you can create it, you can build it. I look back on my legacy. I hope I have a legacy. I like to think I have a bit of a legacy, but I look back on what I've done and I think, wow, like I started this company in the basement of my home and look where we are today. That's been a tremendous amount of effort, but it's been extremely gratifying. And, I think that the biggest piece of advice that I can give somebody who's starting a business or wants to start a business is we all have a product. We all have a service. We all have that thing that we believe is great. We believe is going to change the world or change the lives of the people who decide to work with us. But your real focus has to be on where are those people coming from? It's great to have a good service and a good product or whatever it is, but you have to be thinking about where the people are coming from. How will you get people to use your service, to buy your product, whatever it is, and that is where the focus has to be. I think 100% of the time. Obviously, you have to have quality, and right. There's all the pieces of the puzzle. But I think a lot of would-be entrepreneurs get very, very focused on my product is great. I have a great product. Look at this wonderful product I have. Yeah, you do. How are you going to sell it? How are you going to get people in the door? Mm-hmm. So I think for me, that's been the lesson that when I've focused on those things, the company has experienced growth. And so that's been a very valuable lesson for me along the way.
Yeah. So as opposed to, resting on your laurels and saying, I know that what we're doing is really good. It's how do I show others, tell others like, look, this is a value add service for you. This is how it's going to benefit you, as opposed to, hey, look at me, look how great this thing is.
Right. And it's doing it without, I hate the hard sale. Yeah. If I get an email saying, hey, I'd like you to explore our product, I delete it. Not interested. I don't want to talk to, I don't want to be that guy who's saying, look at the great product we sell, contact us. Mm-hmm. I want to just put ourselves out there so that people know, hey, these guys know what they're doing. These guys are great at what they do. I think I'm going to give them a call. When people come to you that way, that's where the opportunity, going back to our earlier discussion about relationships, that's where the relationship can start. But if it starts with you making a hard sell, right. I don't know. I don't feel like that's a great basis for creating that connection.
It's not. I think we're in a culture now, in a society where that cold call that is very much like buy my product, it's very transparent. It's very easy to tell that. It's the genuine connection with someone to talk about the service they're providing, the product they're selling, to get to know them first and understand how it can benefit the specific individual they're targeting versus being like, we sell this one thing, you buy it. I don't know anything about you. Right. I'm just calling you up or emailing you. I think today that's such an old method that I don't think is as valuable today as might have been even 20, 30 years ago, where you could cold call someone and say, buy this product. I think you have to be willing to build that relationship with someone and be genuine and passionate about the services you offer and believe in them to the point where it's like, I know this can help you and this is why.
Right. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Looking ahead to the future, so what does the next 20 years look like? What kind of visions do you have for Benard Associates going forward?
Well, we're trying to scale right now. We're trying to grow and expand. So there's a lot of challenges with that. We've got a lot of cool things in the works. In fact, some things I actually don't want to share right now because I want them to be a surprise later, but some really cool stuff that we're working on. I think that really what it's really just continuing to do what we do. One of the reasons why one of the reasons why we've been successful is we stay in our lane. If you look at a lot of other organizations, whether it's a law firm that happens to do investigations or it's an investigations company that does 10 different kinds of investigations, I feel like, that's great that they do that and, they can do them, right? But I've always believed in staying in our lane. So, we've made a name for ourselves doing 2 or 3 things really well, and we're going to continue to do those 2 or 3 things really well. Learn how to innovate, learn how to grow it, learn how to scale it, and just keep building the company so that at some point I can kind of pass it off to somebody to continue carrying that torch. But yeah, I think it's really just about continued growth and of course the constant and never ending improvement is sort of another motto that I tend to live by. Just because we do something well today doesn't mean we're going to do it well tomorrow. And just because the things we do today work doesn't mean those things are going to work tomorrow. So it's always about innovating, learning, growing, continuing to be better at what we do. So that's a huge part of it. We won't grow if we don't do that.
Mm-hmm. Not that you're ready to retire yet, but when you get to a point where you get to look back and on your journey as a founder of this company and kind of like you said, your legacy for yourself, even at this point, like what are some personal anecdotes that you can share about that journey and kind of how it's led you to today?
Wow, that's a good one. It's I think that the thing that is stuck out the most during this last 20 years has been the hours of work, the countless hours of work. There are so many people I talk to who think, you start a company, you own a company, you're basically, kick back, legs up, counting the money. They don't realize that this is the hardest I've ever worked in my life. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing it now for 20 years. There's definitely no slowing down. And, but to look back on it and say, well, what is what have been the hallmarks of that? Honestly, I'm kind of at a loss for words. Yeah. I don't have a particular story I can tell, but I think that there's just a tremendous amount of satisfaction. It's we've had bumps in the road, we've had issues, we've always tackled those issues head on. For me, the number one thing I want to walk away from at the end of it all is to know that I was respected, to know that the clients that worked with us appreciated the work we do, and that my name is associated with good things, mm-hmm. right? And now, a big part of that is now moving into this more charitable piece as well that we're trying to tie into the company. Mm-hmm.
When you talk about the amount of hours, it sounds like your wife is very supportive in this journey. Is actually part of the journey.
She is.
How does it affect your personal life? Like, or how has it over these years? Like, has it always been that supportive nature where it's like, this is what we're doing, this is what we're grinding through and putting those hours in? Or have there been those challenges where it can affect your personal life?
It definitely can affect your personal life. Mm-hmm. So Brenda, my wife, is her and I were married 10 years ago. So we're a second marriage, and she's part of the company, and she's a big part of the company. In fact, a lot of the big changes that we've made and a lot of the growth that we've had has been directly related to her actually pushing me to say, let's take this chance. There's an old movie, Field of Dreams.
Great movie.
And that expression in Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. And she is the person who's pushed me to believe that. So there was a time where we just said, you know what? Let's just hire 4 more investigators and let's go out and get the work for them. Let's not wait for the work, which is a really risky thing to do.
Yep.
But it was her who pushed me to do that. And so, but there have also been times where she's quite honestly said, hey, I didn't start this company, so I need time too. So it's a balancing act, mm-hmm. right? And she's incredibly understanding. I try to find that balance as much as I can, but I'm not going to lie. There's been times I haven't. And there's been times where I've had to say, I'm sorry, but she's supportive, understanding. She's there for me. She's a part of this and together, and that's why we're excited about the charitable piece, because that's bringing her in, to a whole different area that she has a lot of passion for. So it's now another part of the business that we can work on and build together.
That's great. I love that. Do you have any advice we have talked about this a little bit, but do you have any other advice for kind of aspiring entrepreneurs, people that want to take this journey, understanding that, after 20 years, like you said, there's no slowing down. It's obviously you have to be willing to put the effort in and go the distance with it to become to establish this type of situation you're in. Any other tips or advice you might give?
I think that you do have to have passion about what it is you're doing. If you're just in it as well, this is a service I can provide, I'll make some money, and you don't love it, you won't stick with it. And so I think you've got to, and you've got to recognize as well, as I already said, you'll work harder doing this than you will in any other job you've ever had. It's funny because when I worked at the College of Nurses of Ontario, that was my regulatory work. That's where I left to start the company. And they were one of my first clients as well, which was nice. But when I left, somebody said to me, you know, I was an emergency room ICU nurse and a police officer. You've worked in emergency rooms, you've worked in ICU, you've been a cop, and you've worked here. What's the toughest job? And of course, they're expecting me to say nursing or policing. And in fact, what I ended up saying was actually managing people. Managing people is really tough. So, not that they're the problem, but you've got to find a way to do it. Mm-hmm. So, when you're an entrepreneur, when you're a founder of a company, you wear every hat.
Absolutely.
So you need to educate yourself. You need to educate yourself in finances, educate yourself in human resources, educate yourself in leadership, on top of the expertise you have that led you to start the company in the first place. So, aside from the things I said earlier about finding customers and all of that, I think to me, that would be the advice I would give somebody is be ready to learn, because it's going to be a lifelong journey of learning. It's never going to stop. Still hasn't stopped for me.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever look back on previous career choices? So obviously nursing and police officer as kind of the ones that stick out to me. You ever look back and say, you know what, I wish I would have stuck with that? Like, has it ever come up in you? Like, you ever have a bad day in the office and say, you know what, sometimes.
Yeah, I'll be honest. Interestingly enough, one of the people who works for me, one of the investigators, is a retired police officer who I used to work with.
Nice.
And I'm not going to lie, there's been a couple times where I've thought, I'd be retired right now. I'd be collecting a full pension. I wouldn't be working, So I have that thought has crossed my mind, and I've thought, was it? But I've never looked back with regret, because the one thing is the life that I've led over these 20 years, what this has afforded me, the opportunity to do, the people I've been exposed to, the opportunities I've had that sometimes within business and sometimes outside of the business, they would never have happened had I stuck with either of those jobs. Not to say that what I've done is better, just it's different. And that's part of the zest of it all. That's part of the experience, right? So you can't just look at it from a financial perspective. Yeah, but every once in a while, on a long day, be nice to be retired.
I also imagine too, like there's in a entrepreneurial spirit too, there's no real off switch, and like you don't punch out at the end of the day and shut off your brain. It's just constant. You're constantly thinking about, what you're working on, what the next project is, how, what you need to do next. You think of like a police officer job, like when you punch out, you're like, okay, I'll pick it up again tomorrow, but like I'm not going home and thinking about it in my sleep necessarily. And so there are those things too.
Most of those jobs, yeah.
But I do think having that passion for something you're doing, while it can be tiresome and long and an arduous journey and a difficult one, I think that passion is still what's going to light the fire. And if you don't have that for the other areas, even though, there's a pension and a paycheck, there's still value to saying, you know what, that's not all that there is in life too, even in my work life, right? Like there's more to it. And I want to pursue something that I'm more passionate about, where I am helping people in a different way, and then also building a team in the process.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. I've pulled some all-nighters as recently as a couple of months ago. And I remember thinking to myself, about to celebrate 20 years in business, in my late 50s, and I'm still pulling all-nighters, right? I'm like, what's wrong with this picture? But the reality is there's nothing wrong with that picture. Right. It's because I didn't mind doing it, because it's all part of the process.
Yeah. Do you have any other final thoughts you'd like to add to this?
I just want to say thank you. Obviously, thank you to you for this interview, but I also want to thank, my clients. I want to thank my staff. I want to thank my wife, Brenda. The support that I've had, both personally and the business has had collectively, is unbelievable. The ability to start and continue to build something like this doesn't happen because you are the Superman who's making it happen. It happens because of the support around you, and it comes from all those places. And I'm just so grateful to all the people that have been there for me and helped lift me up and lift this company up.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of them will probably say the same about you, to be able to support their career paths and build this culture for them.
I hope so.
Yeah,
it
sounds like you've got a pretty good legacy started there. Thank you for coming in today, Dean. I appreciate the time. And
no, thanks, Darren. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.